So the biggest shock anyone had when they started with Maya 2017 was the change of render engines to Arnold Renderer. The difference is immense. So we have for example, a cube here. The default renderer is Arnold Renderer, and then if I press render, it doesn't come up with anything. Prior to this, using Maya software as your default, you could quite easily render a frame and it would come up with an image that's better than what's in your normal viewport. So what's going on here? What's the question? What we're really looking at is a different render system, a new updated render system that really works with lights in a different way. So it is actually rendering that scene, but for Arnold Renderer, these lights, these default lights in the scene, are not providing enough light for it to work. And we can see this by actually adding in some lights of our own. So if we have the rendering tab open, we can take, for example, a spotlight, and we can create that in our scene. If I just zoom out slightly and line that up onto my cube, I'm just going to have it at a slight angle, otherwise it's going to be very flat and have a very boring look. So I can actually see within this, I've shrunk my viewports right down. If I bring this across slightly, I can see I have some options on my viewport. One of them here is to use all lights. So that'll start showing me what this light is pointing at, which is very useful to see. So I'll just bring that up on top corner there, and that should give me a nice lighting on this object. So once I've got that, again I can render this and I can start to see the object I've got in Arnold Renderer. So it is a bit of a shock. If I go back to the Maya software, I do have a much brighter image there, and this is because of the decay. So on this spotlight attribute here, I have an Arnold tab, and we can see that what people are showing us on the web is that if you turn off this decay type, put that to constant, then the lighting isn't going to work in the same way. So if I just save that Maya software one, the light doesn't decay. It's going to come up more visible than if it does decay. So we'll put that back again, quadratic, save that image and render again, then you can see it's changing. I actually like this lighter way of working. I was always turning down the lights in Maya just to get them to work within that. So once you get over that shock, you can start working with these items and really start getting things to work. So the Arnold render also comes with its own lights. So you can get them from the Arnold tab up here. You have area light, Skydome light, mesh light and photometric light. Really only work with these area and Skydome lights, but as well as that it does have our regular lights in there. Now it's suggesting directional light, point light, spotlight as the main ones, and this quad light isn't one that's been in many settings of Maya previously, but it's kind of an area light. It's been renamed as from being an area light which lights an area in a single direction. So that's a change that's working there as well. So adding this light in as well, it should give us a brighter scene, and we're starting to build up the light in there without going over the top. So once we're working with this subtle lighting, the great thing is that Arnold also has these Skydome lights. So the Skydome light will allow you to put in a light all around the scene, and so we'll keep it on this intensity of 1, and I'll render again after saving that. So we're setting up the highlights of our piece there, and then we're flooding it with this whole sphere around the item there as well. So if I go out of that picture, you can see this kind of Skydome light is a real spherical image, spherical type object that's just shining in on there as well. So again, I'm going to bring the intensity down on that. It's kind of normal for me to work in that way. So we don't want it to be blown out completely, and this allows us to have a good level of light. So we're kind of building this up from this dark shape to giving a good fill all around on that as well. Another thing we can do with this Skydome is we can work with HDR images. So high dynamic range images allow you to map an environment onto the sphere and use that for lighting. So I've got one I downloaded already from hdrihub.com. This one's called Field, and it takes a while to load up because it is about 100 megabytes in size. And you can see here it's a scene with a nice sky, but it has the range of light on the scene and the direction of the light on the scene loaded up as well. So we'll see that pop up in a minute. Here we go. So we've got reasonable shadows on the ground here. It's quite an even light. And we can see how that's creating an event. If I zoom in and out, it doesn't actually change the background much because of the idea of scale in there. So I'll keep it round on this side because that's where my main lighting is, and I'll render that again. So with this I can see that the background's not showing up, but I am getting a lot more colour in this shot. So there's a lot of colour in there that's working with my scene. So I'm going from this grey to getting this overspill of light in there as well. I am getting a kind of grain in there as well. I can see this grainy image coming up. We'll look at that in a moment with the render settings and the sampling. But that's really brought that, again, brought it into another level. So the top part is brighter because the light's coming down, and the other sides are less. We also have these lights on the side affecting it slightly as well, but less so. We have a lot of light going on in there. If I go to the opposite side where that light isn't showing, I'm going to see that there is a good amount of light on there as well. So if I zoom in on that again, I do have a lot of grain. So what I'm going to do now is go to the render view, and I'm going to look at the render settings. There's a few different things I can do here, and so it comes up the render settings, and it has my Arnold Renderer selected here. It has the basic settings in this, which are image size for render and aspects such as that. In the Arnold Renderer itself, again, we're talking about this sampling. We can actually bring that up slightly. So it's the diffuse, which is this color. We're not working with much else at the moment. So this diffuse color is really something that we want to bring up in samples. I'm just going to bring the camera AA and the diffuse up to 5. And so if I save that now, we should be able to re-render that, and I'm hoping that that will take away all of that noise on that scene. So we've kind of got that there, and it has improved it a lot. There is some noise still on there. I'll have to play with those settings a lot more, but comparatively we've actually got that vastly improved, and we're working with something much nicer and smoother at this point. So again, looking at that sampling is another thing we can do, but another aspect is environment. So the environment and background is a key to working with this Skydome. So I can click on this background here, I can create a sky shader, and this will allow me to have an item in there as well. There's also this physical sky shader, which allows me to simulate daylight, which is kind of more of a procedural texture, but this is photographic. So I'll click on the sky shader there. If I want to get back to this, if I've lost it and I'm not selecting it here, I can click on this black arrow here, and it will take me over to that. So at the moment we have this white, you see that's sort of bleached out quite a lot, but white image in there. The intensity isn't actually showing up any on that. But what we want to do is link this again to the file that we're working with, and if I link it into this HDR image, so HDR stands for High Dynamic Range Image, so I don't need to say I on the end of that when I say image. Anyway, so that now, if I look in my outliner, shows me this thing called transform. So I've got Skydome Light here and the transform. The transform actually contains this AI sky. So I'll take those render settings out of the way for a minute. And so now if I render this image, click on render current frame, we do get this background in our scene as well. So we're getting a background in our scene. We're using this light within it to light our scene. We're actually getting a lot brighter scene now as well. So we need to work out why that's happening, and you can see that is rendering in the background as well. So within this sky image here, I do have an intensity, and I might think that that might be what's making this happen, but the brightness isn't coming from that intensity, so I'm going to leave that at 1. This render stats here, this is what we want to check out. We want to check out whether it's casting shadows, it's primary visibility, whether it's visible in diffuse. Now this is what we're looking at here, the colour of this. So it is visible currently in the diffuse. So I'm going to turn off those 2 checkboxes, and I'm going to render again. If I do another render on that, render the current frame, I find that it does, fingers crossed, go back to that image that we had there, and we can see that render coming up much more to the liking that we would want. So again, I can turn that around to have different aspects of the scene. It's very dark in that area there. If I have a much brighter background to it, it should similarly show up like that within my scene. So I'm bringing together a scene very quickly within Maya and generating a complex scene with this combination of photography and imagery there. So I'm using this lighting, and the lighting will spill over into this object with its colour.